Assalamu alaikum everyone. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wahlul 'uqdatan min lisani yafqahu qawli. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Allahumma salli ala sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Inshallah, this week we will continue the next part, the third ray in the 25th word. Last week we had discussed the fifth glow. The fifth glow was regarding the extraordinary comprehensiveness of the Quran in regard to its aims and subjects, meanings and styles, and its subtle qualities and fine virtues. And we had discussed about this and about things like how the Quran spoke in a very decisive fashion, or it spoke without falsehood, and it spoke clearly. And we had spoke about things like if there's like if you don't know a subject very well, you wouldn't go into depth about it, or maybe you might not even talk about it. But the Quran covers many aspects. It's very comprehensive in the things it covers, and it covers it in a way that's clear, or relatively clear. With study you can understand it, and it's you can verify it, and it's very comprehensive. And this week, inshallah, we will continue with the third ray. And this third ray is again about the miraculousness of the Quran, as the 25th word is. And I'll begin reading it, inshallah. This is the miraculousness of the Quran, of miraculous exposition, which is its giving news of the unseen, preserving its youth in every age, and being appropriate to every level of person. So it's giving news of the unseen, and it's preserving its youth in every age, and it's appropriate to every level of person. Now we're talking about the unseen. And this ray has three radiances. So he's splitting it into three parts. The first part, the first radiance, it's giving news of the unseen. It consists of three glistens. The first glisten is it's telling about the past, one part of the unseen. Indeed, the all-wise Quran mentions through the tongue of one whom everyone agreed was both unlettered and trustworthy, the important events and significant facts concerning the prophets from the time of Adam till the era of bliss, in a way which, confirmed by scriptures like the Torah and the Bible, tells of them with the greatest power and seriousness. So this Quran, we see, is speaking about important events and significant facts concerning prophets from the age of Adam, which has been confirmed in other scriptures such as the Torah and Bible, and it talks about them in great seriousness and greatest power. I guess it talks about them in like a very strong way. So it's talking about the past, one part of the unseen. Continuing, it concurs with the points on which the former books were agreed and decides between them on the points over which they differed, pointing out the truth of the matter. That is to say, the Quran's view, which penetrates the unseen, sees the events of the past in a way over and above all the previous scriptures, and pronounces them right and confirms them in the matters on which they are agreed, and acts as an arbiter between them, correcting in matters about which they are at variance. However, the facts the Quran relates about the events of the past are not things that could have been learnt through the exercise of reason, that they were communicated by it. They were rather transmitted knowledge, dependent on the heavens, on revelation. And as for transmitted knowledge, it is the domain of those who know how to read and write. And these were revealed to one known by friend and foe alike, as knowing neither how to read nor how to write, and as being trustworthy, someone described as unlettered. Also, the Quran tells of those past events as though it had actually seen them. For it takes the spirit and vital point of a lengthy event and makes them the introduction to its aims. That is to say, the summaries and extracts which the Quran contains show that it sees all the past together with all its events. For just as someone who is an expert in some science or craft shows his skill and proficiency through some succinct words or a concise statement, so the summaries and spirits of events mentioned in the Quran show that the one who said them comprehends all the events and sees them. And if one may say so, relates them with extraordinary skill. So I'll stop there. We can go over this. Just the first glisten. So again, this is talking about now Nursi's talking about the miraculousness of the Quran's exposition in terms of how it gives news of the unseen. So number one, it gives news of the unseen, and that's what we're diving into now. And then he'll also talk about how it's preserving its youth in every age and being appropriate to every level of person. So he's going to talk about these. Right now we're discussing how it gives news of the unseen. Nursi is then splitting this into three. And the first way it's giving news about the unseen, the first glisten, it's saying how the All-Wise Quran mentions through the tongue of one whom everyone agreed was both unlettered and trustworthy the important events and significant facts. So it's talking about how, the Quran does talk about the stories of the prophets. The Quran does relate these events. It goes into them sometimes in detail, and sometimes it mentioned things that were never, let's say, previously described. It says, it relates it enough detail that you could see that there's an association between like the Torah and the Bible. Like it follows the other scriptures, but then it even decides on the areas where the other scriptures are not clear. Like it's an arbiter between the two scriptures. So like it's relating these events that these other two scriptures are relating, but it's relating them even it's relating them in a way as if like the person was there, or the one telling the story or the event was there, with that confidence. And you can see that there's truth in the way it's relating it. And also an important fact is, these are not events that you reach with reason. These are events that are transmitted over time. He says that everyone agreed that the Prophet ﷺ was unlettered, and he was unlettered and trustworthy. But I think the point he's making here is like he didn't read these materials and then pass them over. They were instead revelation for him. Like they were revealed. These events were revealed through the Quran. So that's my general understanding about the first glisten. Would anyone like to make a comment or say something they found interesting within this first glisten? Yeah, go ahead, Brother Yusuf.
So in previous week's discussions, we were talking about whether these are stories about historical events or not. And I remember making a comment there because there was a question whether shall we take these as exclusively metaphorical stories, or were they real events that happened in the history, because there are a lot of interpretations and translations which take them literally as events that have happened. And during that discussion, I'm trying to remember what was our point. So there were two major points. The first one was, since these are events that are happened and there is no way that I can go and confirm. So the primary benefit of those stories for me here and now is I need to ask the question, what does it mean for me? But this being said, taking the stories exclusively as metaphorical is also missing a point, because the reason was those stories are stories of prophets, and prophethood is playing an essential role in my understanding of this existence. So prophets must come, and this is part of my conclusion about the existence also. And they must have gone through hardships or events of life that I am also going through. So these things must have happened really. And then, because then I'm going to be interested in their response. If it is some hypothetical stories, then I would say, well, it sounds good, but if it has never happened, and then I'm going to be the first person to do it, it becomes much more challenging and distant to me. So it rather should be close and relatable to me. So this is why prophets' stories should have happened, because of this second aspect also. So this being said, now their actual happening becomes important for me. Then when Quran is narrating these stories to me, now the author is making this as a point of its miraculousness, but what is his evidence for that? So his reasoning for that is, this book is coming in the mouth of a man who is unlettered. So he didn't know how to read, how to write. But when it comes to stories of the ancient, if I'm going to take it as such, you need to have this scholarly background to hear multiple stories, then identify which ones are reasonable, which ones are not. And then, as Quran is doing, which the author is alluding to in the last paragraph, he's saying that Quran is talking about the very key parts of those stories. So it must be that from beginning to end, Quran is aware of the whole event, or coming from the mouth of someone who is aware of the entire event, but just reporting the very key points of this event, because the point is not to simply give you a historical event, but to give you account of it to the extent that it's going to convey its message succinctly, but very clearly. And it's going to make it as a stepping stone for its goal. So utilizing it properly shows how comfortable the speaker is about the event and its details. So for example, if I'm going to quote anything to you about World War I, if you are better than me in terms of, or at least know the events of World War I, and if I'm just speaking to you by my middle school information, you can spot it very easily. You can say, well, this guy is just very superficial in his knowledge of World War I, and this is why he is coming up with not really the core reasons of why the war has started, but simply thinks that it started because a soldier, a Serbian private, killed the prince of, I don't know, Austria, and then the war started. But if a person knowledgeable about all the events, they're going to give you the very keys of why this war really break. Say, maybe going to make underlying reasons such as the industrial like revolution, and then I don't know, whatever the reasons of it are, maybe colonization and this and that, then you would say, oh, this guy is aware of what he's talking about. So as when Quran narrates these stories, the way it speaks about them, wherever it gives detail, wherever it avoids detail, makes me realize that the speaker in here is aware of from beginning to end, must be aware of what has happened. But then I'm looking at who is the speaker. So he is a man, an illiterate person. And then this makes it miraculous, saying that this cannot be the speech of this man. Thank
you. Thank you for your comments. I guess one question I have regarding this, maybe a few weeks ago, I saw this webpage where this person was taking verses from the Quran. I believe it was about Ibrahim alayhi salam, and then comparing him to another part of the scripture. I don't know what he was comparing to, maybe the Bible. And he was saying how this disproves the Quran. Like he was looking at the variances in history, like how Ibrahim alayhi salam went to his people and said something, and then he's like, "This is where the Quran is wrong because, in this scripture, actually we see that what's explained is he did not go to his people and speak like that. He first did something else, or the story is a bit different." So he's like finding a little bit of a discrepancy in the story and trying to disprove the Quran in such a way. So it's just, it's hard for me to understand how this would be helpful, because if it is a retelling of history and it is speaking about, and if it's explaining things where they differ, then there's potentially, you have three different events. I don't know if the Torah and the Bible differ and then the Quran differs another way, then there's three different sources, you could say. So by itself, like, I don't see this as a strong, like, I don't see how it would be a point that someone could believe in. Like, I guess you could first come to believe in the Quran and all the rest of it, and then be like, okay, no, the Quran is from the Creator, and it is the most, like, it is unchanged. The other ones perhaps are changed, and thus you can come to believe in this. But it's, I guess, like, what I'm trying to say is it's hard for me to understand how this is a miraculous aspect of the Quran, when we can't really verify that the other two are wrong. We just kind of still accept the history that the Quran presents to us as well. It's kind of not so relatable to me personally, if that makes sense. Like, I'm not very awed by this thing because I can't really understand it, if that makes sense. But in one sense, though, regardless of that, it does. There is, I guess you could say, there is a pattern where things are aligned, things are coherent, because the previous scriptures spoke about prophets, and this scripture is also speaking about prophets, so that you can say, like, the author of these scriptures, the one who revealed these scriptures, there's like a unity in there. You could find that there's a unity in the prophets as well. It's not just coming with something completely out of the blue. So there's a unity there. And then I would also like to focus on this third point here that Nursi is talking about. The Quran tells of those past events as though it had actually seen them. And for it takes the spirit and vital point of a lengthy event and makes them the introduction to its aim. I think maybe this is the most miraculous aspect for me that I can understand, is it is taking these stories and maybe even taking certain parts of these stories and making them so relatable to me, so understandable for me, that I can read the story of Ibrahim alayhi salam and I can understand his submission to his creator. And I can gain a lesson from that. I can understand how I need to submit to my creator. Or I can read the story of Ayyub alayhi salam and see how he just also was submitting to his creator, how patient he was, or of Yunus alayhi salam. These stories, these prophets, how these events are even like very small pieces of their maybe life story or these events are being related, but they're extremely monumental. Like, they have monumental impacts in my life, or their meaning is so great. It's a very miraculous thing to be able to do that. So unless anyone else has comments, I will move on to the second glisten. Okay. The second glisten is it's giving news of the Brother Rikan, go ahead.
Jazakallah khairan. Can you hear me well?
Yeah, perfect.
Okay, Jazakallah khairan again. So there is one part which I want to talk about, which it says these are not the matters of reason, or it's like you cannot get this by reasoning, but it is a domain of revelation, heavens and revelation, it says. That's really interesting. Like the parts we are studying is about unseen, right? Author says the Quran is talk about unseen, and the history, or let's say the events of previous prophets, is just one example. It says there are parts in Quran which talks about unseen, and these parts related to unseen are not the subject matter of reason, but heavens and revelation. So what are we going to understand from that? Like, are we going to say we cannot think of them, we cannot come up with whether this happened or that happened, but we have to rely on whatever Quran says, or is there something more out of there? Like, what does it mean? So that's the question, right? What does it mean to be a matter of, or in the domain of heavens and revelation? So what I understand from that is, so human beings have different the faculties, different ways to understand reality, what's going on, or different ways, different tools to make sense of things. And reason is one of them. Reason of one of them. There are many other things, like our feelings, for instance, our senses. Like I see something and I know that it is as it is because I see it, simply, not because I reason. Like when I say I have 5 fingers, for instance, the first maybe mode of knowing is related to my sense that I see my fingers, and then I can feel my fingers, then I can use my fingers, and so on and so forth. And then I can hear, I can feel, I can hate something, or I can love something, but at the same time I can reason, right? Even through the direct input of senses or through some abstractions, I can reason and come up with an understanding of what's going on. But when it comes to maybe more serious matters, like what's going on to me, why I'm getting older, what's going to happen to me, why there is injustice in the world, why even kids are suffering, innocent kids, and all these serious questions, and even the more serious one, like what will happen to these innocent kids once they die out of injustice. All these questions requires also an answer. And when I try to answer these questions using my senses, my feelings, my reason, everything that I'm given with, or maybe my conscience, all the inputs from outside, all the methodologies I know, like the science, philosophy, everything, I cannot come up with the answers that satisfies me, satisfies my human being, right? Completely. I cannot find such solutions. And there I say, whoever made me, whoever gave me these questions, whoever put me in this situation must be the one who would give me the answer. If there's a question, there must be an answer. Otherwise, this creation that I experience, that I live in, doesn't make much sense. And I guess this understanding is, it's the summary of, or probably summarized, sorry, with this sentence that there are certain things which are not in the domain of reason, but in the heavens and revelation. So when I ask my Creator that you gave me these questions, give me please my answers, then I rely on, I appeal to revelation. I appeal to unseen. I realize, accept that there is an unseen beyond whatever I see. And I need some answers regarding this unseen from this unseen. I must be given answers from unseen. So I guess this understanding is really important. It's completes my ways of interacting with reality. Without revelation, without heavens, I'm not giving the definition of heaven what I understand, because we already studied it a lot. Without heavens, without revelation, without talk from my Creator, speech from my Creator, things are not completed. My understanding, my connections with reality are not complete. But with it, it's completed. So I think this sentence is very important. So we shouldn't take this part merely speaking of historical events or events that happen about the prophets, but in more generic way. It's just an example. It's an example to make us better understand that there are certain things in reality that you cannot reach through reason. And historical events, one example, for instance, like there is no one who would claim, oh no, I can look at the input from my senses or my observations, and I can come up with the historical explanation of an event happened a few centuries ago. Nobody would claim that, because it's a matter of a transmission of knowledge from some source that I don't have access to. But what I do have is the speech or the knowledge coming from this source, like historical texts, for instance. Like they are coming from unseen. Within the realm of, within this universe, an analogy to unseen is an information coming from history. The same way, in the bigger scale, that within the entire universe, including the past and future, there is an unseen part that I need to rely to get some understanding, some answers related to my serious questions. Again, this is like a bigger picture understanding of this text, I believe. When it comes to the very specific subject matter of events of prophets, I think what is most important is, as Yusuf said, that I have an understanding that there must be some prophets, there must be some people who lived in every age, or who was accessible in every age. It doesn't have to be like for each person there is a prophet, but rather for each person there is a way to access to prophets. There must be such a creation. That's my expectation. And Quran says, yes, this is the fact. It fits to your expectations. So what is my proof? How am I going to validate what happened or what is narrated in Quran. Quran come up with for instance, a story, a narration about Prophet Solomon, right? It gives me some historical events. The first thing, it confirms my expectations. It complies with my expectations. It fits to my expectations. There must be such a prophet. And then he gives some characteristics, some personal features, if we can say, of this prophet. Again, it fits to my expectations. And very interesting, the different prophets have different personalities, which is perfectly fit my expectations because they are all human beings. And not one human being is equal to another human being, right? I'm not trying to make a comment about diversity here, but not one person is same with another person. So the prophets should be same as well. One prophet should be, maybe get easily angry, like Prophet Moses. Another prophet should be very calm. Another prophet should be like, this is my expectation. I'm not saying that, that must be a prophet with every personality trait, but rather the way it is narrated in Quran, with prophets having different personalities, fits my expectations again. And then things happen, and then prophets react. The prophets react to these events, and what is narrated again fits to my expectation. Like with every detail, I can confirm that yes, this must be the case with prophets. When I look at other scriptures, for instance, for let's say Prophet Solomon, I see some awkward narrations are there. Like one prophet going astray, having a lot of women around just for pleasure, getting rich and getting spoiled, and so on and so forth. I say, wait a second, this cannot be a prophet. Like, you're talking about something else, definitely. Your understanding of the prophet does not fit the understanding of myself, my expectations from prophets. This cannot be possible. So what kind of confirmation we're talking about, and what kind of miracle we're talking about, I think from beginning to end, from the most abstract sense to most practical sense, that what is narrated in Quran fits to my human expectations. Every event fits to my human expectations. Even prophets can make quote unquote mistakes as narrated in Quran, but definitely they shouldn't be big mistakes. Otherwise, I would question their state, whatever, as a prophet. But I see that they are human beings. They tend to make have some tendency towards something, like Prophet Jonah escaping from his duty, but then realizing his mistake and continuing. So this is something that I expect, and that I can accept with a prophet. But one prophet going astray and killing people or having pleasure or whatever, it's not something that I can expect, they accept. It doesn't fit to my expectations. And this is a big miracle, I believe. If things fit to your human qualities, rather than you trying to change yourself just to accept what is narrated in Quran, the difference between the two is, I guess, a huge miracle. I talked a lot. I apologize. Jazakallah khairan.
No, thank you very much for your comment. Definitely I agree with everything you're saying, and I think it's very important to remember those points you brought up. I see also Brother Yusuf brought his hand up. Go ahead, Brother Yusuf.
Very briefly, at some point I was attending Bible studies. A neighbor of ours was making some Bible studies, and I was attending to see what the Bible is talking about. And during that time, that lady was going through some biblical prophet stories with nicely made like videos. So at the end, she was arguing that since biblical stories of prophets have like some intoxicated prophets or prophets having out of marriage affairs or this sort of problems that or misbehavior or sometimes denial or even arguing against the creator, this sort of behavior is being narrated for the prophets in those scriptures. So the lady was taking it as, well, these are real human things that those people went through. So they become more relatable to me like that, she was saying. So which we do not observe in Quran. We do not see prophets that are challenging the creator or wrestling with the creator. I mean, even figuratively or like literally. We don't observe this in the Quran. Quran is talking about prophets as people that didn't commit sins, I would say, quote unquote. I am putting sins within the quotes. Quran do mention them sometimes making certain maybe mistakes, if one could say, such as Noah asking for his son's like forgiveness, although he was a like unbeliever. Then the creator is explicitly like warning him. Or I don't know, Jonah leaving his people. So these sort of maybe apparent, like something like a mistake is being mentioned, but it's not in the sense of like arrogance that we observe as the stories of Bible is time to time mentioning. So this makes me think. So in the light of what the author is putting in here, what would I expect from a messenger? Yes, I expect a messenger to have a relatable story to me, but relatable to what extent? Shall the messenger go through like the worst experiences that a human can have in terms of abusing his free will? Or like going through some hardships as like let's take either the example of Musa when he's trying to prevent an injustice, then unintentionally killing someone, or Yusuf, Joseph's story, like he's being righteous, but then being put into prison because of somebody blaming him for an action that he didn't do. Yet we do not observe a misuse of free will in there. So I think in here, Quran correcting those stories is making sense to me. Now I am thinking in terms of my response to that Christian lady, in terms of she finding those prophetic stories in Bible more relatable than Quran stories. I would expect messengers to be a criterion of right from wrong for me. This is why I am in need of scripture. It's for guidance. If the person who is going to guide me is misguided, then it poses a huge problem for me, because this would be my criterion. Then I am left with my own senses. Then I have to find the truth by myself. I become the only scale of truth then, which is not that easy. I mean, if I can become the only scale of truth by myself, I don't even need the scripture. So the reason I am in need of messenger is because I am in need of guidance as in the human form, if you like. So if that source of guidance is misguided, it becomes an issue. So this is why when I compare Quranic stories of the messenger with the biblical stories of the messenger, and where Quran is either not narrating the stories as they are being narrated in the other scriptures, I would say that, well, this makes sense. This is how it should be. The other one, when I read an intoxicated prophet having a relationship with his two daughters, I say, well, this is not fitting to the picture of a prophet. Sorry, there is something wrong going on with this story. And when Quran is talking about Lut without such a totally distorted image, I would say, yeah, this is how it must be. So I can now confirm Quran's way of saying it, because the other one is simply doesn't make any sense at all. It's contrary to, as Brother Bikan was saying, my expectation from the idea or the image of a messenger. Because otherwise I'm going to be left to my own senses, which I would ask to my creator, oh, my creator, I am in need of guidance. Where is my guidance? Thank you.
Thank you. That helped me very much understand the first point in this lesson about how the Quran is acting as an arbiter between these different scriptures. And for sure, based off what both you and Brother Birkan were saying, the expectations of what we have of a prophet and then how they don't seem to make sense. But then when the Quran presents a view which seems to be coherent and does make sense and is understandable, then it can act as an arbiter between them. And then I can be like, okay, this is truth, because it fits, it is coherent, it fits. It's not, let's say, weird or corrupted like the other ones seem to be. Brother Birkan, go ahead.
Yusuf said something interesting when he was concluding his thoughts. He said, but this kind of narration about the prophets doesn't make sense. He said, in text, author says one cannot, come to this conclusion by reason, or cannot find out about them by reason. So is author saying that, oh, you cannot use your reasoning to confirm, or you cannot use your reasoning to decide which one is right or wrong? You have to, they argue, as in Abdurrahman example, the person was arguing, the Quran is wrong because Bible is saying something else. So we could say, oh, Bible is wrong, or this source is wrong. Why? Because the Quran is telling another story, and we have to choose something. And because we cannot use our reasoning, we have to rely on our our ancestors, our culture, or the fear which were imposed upon me during my childhood. Like if I say something against Quran, I will go to hell. So I think what the author means that one cannot. What is the exact sentence? Let me read. Sorry. Are not the things that could have been learned through the exercise of reason. So what the author is saying, that the source of this explanation, the source of this narration cannot be reason. It cannot be originated from your reason. So it cannot be the case that, you one day come up with the idea that, you know what, there must be such a prophet, who lived in such an environment and who brought such a message. You cannot come up with such a detailed understanding. All you can say that my creator must be speaking to me somehow. It must be, maybe assign some person or people to guide me at most, right? But the origin of the narrations, origin of the knowledge or explanation or the answers to your serious questions cannot be your reason. the source has to be unseen, heavens. But on top of that, you have to use your reason to either accept or deny what is given to you from this alleged source. Because we know that, the people can say that, oh yeah, I had a revelation and this is the answer. You have to use your reason. That's one thing. So what Yusuf said, I think, is important. Like, whether it makes sense or not, you have to decide. The second thing, I guess, when author says, sorry, Quran proves or Quran corrects other sources, other scriptures, what I understand is that Quran corrects our understanding of prophets. Otherwise, whether Moses did this or that, whether it was two ladies who trying to, the feed their cattle, or whether it was three ladies in reality, one of the sisters was, behind a tree or whatever. These parts are not, the parts which, needs to be confirmed, but rather the event itself, the message in the event itself, and how it applies to my life. When I put myself as Moses, when I put myself as these ladies, and even maybe it will be hard for me, but easier for others, even when I put myself as the cattle, whether it makes sense or not, whether such an understanding of prophet as narrated in Quran makes sense, or another understanding of prophet as narrated in other scriptures makes sense or not. So this is where Quran corrects, I think, these narrations. And when we look at other scriptures, we easily realize that even when they call them as prophets, they actually don't have this concept of prophethood in these scriptures. The word prophet is simply used for a holy man, like a man of God. But it's not the same thing as Quran suggests, that someone who is specially educated, trained by the Creator, given all the answers, all the messages by the Creator directly, whatever it means, without any, the mistakes or errors, and someone who lives this message as a means of guidance. With every action, there is the meaning which relates to the message they carry. Such an understanding of prophet, you realize it's not there with other scriptures. So Quran corrects the understanding, the concept, the notion of prophethood. Jazakallah khairan.
Jazakallah khairan. Thank you for your comments again. I think, this was a very, very good way to start off the first listen. It definitely, some points I was uncertain about are now much more clear to me, especially about this idea of how we can verify truths of what the Quran speaks. We can verify the stories, or we can see truths in the stories of the prophets, let's say, and how it is an arbiter in those sense, because of like how it makes sense, how we can expect this idea of prophethood to be represented. Yeah, thank you for all those comments. So, inshallah, we can continue with the second lesson then. And I think a lot of the some of the points that were mentioned will also be talked about in the upcoming glistens, maybe the third glisten. I don't know if we'll get there. Let's see, inshallah. So the second glisten is it's giving news of the future. So the first glisten was talking about the past. This was one part of the unseen. So the second one, the second part of the unseen, is it's giving news of the future, which is another part of the unseen. There are many sorts of this. The first sort is particular and special to the saints and those who seek the truth through illumination. For example, Muhyiddin al-Arabi discovered numerous instances of the Quran's giving news of the unseen in the surah Alif Lam Mim, the Roman Empire has been defeated. And Imam al-Rabbani saw many signs of the events of the unseen and the communicating of them through the disjointed letters at the start of some surahs and so on. So disjointed letters, the separated letters like the Alif Lam Mim, Yasin, Hamim is what I'm assuming that means. For scholars of the Batiniya school, the Quran consisted from beginning to end of information about the unseen. We, however, shall indicate some which are general. These two have many levels, one of which we shall discuss. Thus, the all-wise Quran says to God's noble messenger, peace and blessings be upon him. So before I read all of these verses that Nursi listed, I think let's just try to understand what we're trying, what he is listing in these verses, what we're trying to find. So it's talking about, Nursi's talking about how now the Quran speaks about the future. So like one aspect of the unseen that the Quran covers is the future. And he's talking about how these different scholars, or these, let's say not scholars, but saints, those who seek the truth through illumination. So like they seek guidance. They were reading these verses in the Quran and they discovered numerous instances within these verses when they were reading the Quran of the unseen. Like it was giving news of the unseen. Alif Lam Mim, the Roman Empire has been defeated. So this gives some news about the unseen, about the future, and how a different scholar or a different saint, Imam Rabbani, understood them in different ways, and how different schools understood them. And then I think one point that we should probably focus on or emphasize is she'll indicate some of which are general. So these verses, which he's now going to be going into, they're actually general. Some of which are general, but they have many levels to discuss. And he is now taking account one level where the Quran is specifically, let's say, speaking to God's noble messenger, alayhi salatu wassalam. So in just, this is one aspect of it, how it speaks to the Prophet ﷺ and maybe that time. So let's just read the verses and try to understand it. I will just read one by one. I'm not going to take too much time on each individual one, but maybe we can get a general understanding. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. So patiently persevere, for God's promise is true. You shall enter the sacred mosque if God wills, with minds secure, heads shaved, hair cut short, and without fear. He it is who sent his messenger with guidance and the religion of truth, so it should prevail over all religion. But they, after this defeat of theirs, will soon be victorious. Within a few years, with God is the decision. Soon will you see, and they will see, which of you is afflicted with madness. Or do they say, a poet, we await from him some calamity hatched by time? Say, wait then, and I shall wait with you. And God will defend you from men. But if you cannot, and over surety you cannot, but they will never seek it. We shall show them our signs of the furthest horizons and in their own selves, so that it becomes clear to them that this is the truth. Say, if the whole of mankind and the jinns were to come together to produce the like of this Quran, they could not produce the like thereof, even if they backed up each other with help and support. God will produce a people whom he will love as they will love him, lowly with the believers, mighty against the rejectors, fighting in the way of God, and never afraid of the reproaches of such as find fault. And say, praise be to God, who will show you his signs so that you shall know them. Say, he is the most merciful. We have believed in him, and in him have we put our trust. Soon you shall know which of us it is that is in manifest error. God has promised to those among you who believe and act righteously that he will of a surety grant them inheritance of power in the land, as he granted it to those before them, that he will establish in authority their religion, which he has chosen for them, and that he will change their state after their fear to one of security and peace. The information about the unseen, which many verses like these give, turned out to be exactly true, because it was given by one who was subject to many criticisms and objections and could have lost his cause through the tiniest mistake, and was spoken unhesitatingly and with absolute seriousness and confidence in a way that confirmed its authenticity. This news of the unseen demonstrates with certainty that the one who gave it had received instruction from the pre-eternal master, and then he spoke. So Nursi says, the information about the unseen, which many verses like these give, turn out to be exactly true. And he's saying that because it was given by one who was under constant pressure, and if he made one mistake, like that would have been enough to disprove him. Like if he made one mistake, everyone would focus on that. However, despite this, the Prophet ﷺ, he spoke very unhesitatingly. He spoke very seriously and confidently, and the news, like the truth of the news about which he spoke, like proves his authenticity and that he was given instruction by a pre-eternal one. It's a bit of a interesting listen, because we're talking here about now the news of the future that the Quran gives. And, reading these verses, some of them are not, maybe many of them, it's hard for me to say like these are exactly true or that they exactly came to be. If we take into context, I'm sure these are all have like tafsir about them where they go into the history and they talk about how each sign or each verse speaks to a certain thing. For example, this one very clearly, you shall enter the sacred mosque if God wills it, mind secure, head shaved, haircut, sure and without fear. This is talking. There's a very clear one. You could say once they captured or they conquered Mecca, let's say, or they entered Mecca, let's say that. Some of these verses, it seems clear about the future they're talking about, and some of them are a lot more, let's say, vague. Like, but if you cannot, and of a surety you cannot, but they will never seek it. They're much more general. And as he says up here, actually, like some of this which are general, he does actually say that. I mean the general point. So please feel free to make your comments. But the general point that I'm understanding is that there are undeniably verses within the Quran which do speak about the future, like even from the Prophet's standpoint, from the place he was in history, it does speak about the future in a way that you can conclude was truthful, like the way he spoke and the authenticity in the way he spoke and the confidence in the way he spoke, and how the fact that it did come out to be true. Like you can, a lot of these are very easy to interpret in his like timeline and see that they were truthful. It proves how the Quran can actually, it's one aspect of proving how the Quran can speak about the future and how it does speak about the unseen. Yeah. Go ahead, Brother Yusuf.
So there was a footnote that we didn't read, the first footnote in this page, actually. In there, the author says, since these verses which give news of the unseen have been expounded in numerous Quranic commentaries, and also due to the haste imposed on the author by his intention to have this work printed in the Old Ottoman script, they have not been explained here, and those valuable treasuries have remained closed. So this in here author is saying that, yeah, there is a treasure in here, but I couldn't give you detailed account of it for two reasons. One is there are tons of other people who have written about this. So this sort of became a folklore, if you like, that everybody now knows, or there are many people focusing on this miraculous aspect of Quran. And the other one, to give a historical information on what he meant by the second part. So after the Turkish Republican Revolution, the Ottoman script, which was Quranic script actually, was forbidden. So, and the author was trying to publish this text before that came into law, so that he can finish the text quickly and publish it before it gets into a law. So he says this is why I couldn't write too much about this part. But this being said, yes, the verses in here, if we were to go one by one on them, are exemplified, even the short ones that Abdurrahman, you were mentioning, like, but if you cannot, and of a surety you cannot, this is actually a part of a verse which is talking about the Quran's challenge for people to bring an example of a Quran. And actually we studied this verse in the previous part, saying that, okay, it cannot be Quran, so just make it 10 verses, bring all your like support and everything. So in multiple stages, maybe in 10 stages, making the case easier and easier for them. But eventually at the end says, but if you cannot, and of surety you cannot, وَإِن لَمْ تَفْعَلُوا وَلَنْ تَفْعَلُوا فَاتَّقُوا النَّارَ الَّتِي وَقُودُهَا النَّاسُ وَالْحِجَارَةُ. So then avoid yourself from the fire, and goes on like that. So, and this happened to be the case. I mean, still up to this day, Quran is not challenged. I mean, Quran is being challenged, but not a, it was never, those challenge never came to truly challenge it. I mean, I can challenge like Hercules, but he's just going to laugh at me, I guess. So this is what's happening. The scientific or the secular system with all its civilization and the scientific discoveries and everything is being used against Quran's worldview, but still it's not able to really challenge, practically speaking, or bringing something that is equal to or better than Quran. So proving the point of this verse. And it's interesting, as the author says at the very end, making such a claim so comfortably. You wouldn't do that if you were at such a vulnerable position. You would speak very vague. You will try to make comments like the politicians are doing today. So a comment you will make so that if you read it this way, it's okay. If you read it the other way, or it can be understood in this other way too. Some sentence which can mean black and white at the same time, like, which means politically correct. Quran is being very explicit in such points. I mean, you wouldn't touch such a matter. Why would you do that? Just play it safe, right? But Quran is speaking about such matters, and they came to be true. So time became a proof of this aspect. So in this regard, its miraculousness is, if you like, proven in this sense, and is being and will be proved further as the time progresses, I think.
Yeah, Jazakallah khairan for that comment. I don't have much more to say about this lesson, so I'll leave the floor open to anyone else that'd like to make a comment. I guess maybe one question I have is, if the Quran is speaking about the future, it is speaking about the unseen. And in this case, maybe it's talking about, Nursi is focusing on how it speaks to the Prophet ﷺ. But it's also, Nursi does mention how these other saints have been able to also read him. So I'm just curious how I could read these verses similarly and see how they speak to me. Maybe first I need to start with the question, do these verses speak to me? And if they speak to me, how can I come to understand them within my life? As that is how we are trying to read the Quran, is trying to understand it as an explanation of my life to me. So that means that technically I could read these verses, or I should be able to read these verses and come to see how they also are true in my life. Like, I can imagine maybe events I lived 5 years ago, and if I then read through this, I could maybe understand how the events I lived 5 years ago, and then the future, or it talks about how this is a very general one here. So patiently persevere, for God's promise is true. This is probably a verse in a larger context, but I could say that, yeah, if you patiently persevere, if you have patience, I have seen that in my past, where if I was able to be patient, then for sure God's promise does come true. I do see that comes to be mercy in the things that you thought there wasn't mercy. If you're able to persevere, maybe a verse like this is harder to understand. You should enter the sacred mosque, if God wills, with mind secure, head shaved, hair cut short, and without fear. I'm sure there is an understanding we can reach to here, but just as these verses spoke to the future of that time, they should also be able to speak to my future. Go ahead, Brother Yusuf.
So I was looking at this famous quote. I thought it was Imam Ali's, but when Googling, I found that it was Ibn Abbas. It is attributed to Ibn Abbas. It says, if I lose my camel or the rope of my camel, I will find it in the Quran. So apparently this claim Ibn Abbas made when he was interpreting one of the verses that is now on this page, which is, God will defend you. Where is it? Oh, and God will defend you from men. Wallahu ya'asimuka minan nas. So this verse is one of the latest verses that was revealed, actually, which has an important connotation, especially for the Shia tradition. But this is the beginning part of this verse says, O Prophet, so let me see. Ya ayyuha rasul, balligh ma unzila ilayka min rabbik, O messenger, convey what was revealed to you from your Lord. وَإِن لَمْ تَفْعَلُوا فَمَا بَلَّغْتَ رِسَالَتَهُ. But if you do not, then you would not have delivered his message. وَاللَّهُ يَعْصِمُكَ مِنَ النَّاسِ. And God will protect you from the people. إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يَهْدِي الْقَوْمَ الْكَافِرِينَ. God does not guide the disbelieving people. So I guess very clear or very straightforward way of understanding this is Prophet ﷺ, despite him being in such a vulnerable position, like having no protector, but as if challenging the whole world, dying in his bed. Like, he was protected. His message was protected. Like, he was personally protected. His body was protected, first of all. He died peacefully in his bed. But maybe more important than for him also, his own life, his message has been protected for so long. So this verse is becoming like a miracle in the sense that even today, to this day, his message being protected is also a confirmation of truthfulness of this verse. And yeah, I was just referring to the other one also, that scholar of Quran, Ibn Abbas, was saying that even if I lose the rope of my camel, I will find it in Quran, which means that person is so much So to be able to say such a thing about Quran, and he was one of the earliest scholars of Quran. So being so much, if you like, in the company of Quran, getting to know Quran so well, he's saying that Quran is talking about everything, something as mundane as me, and specific as me losing my camel's rope, or to make it, let's say, more practical for today, losing my car keys. I'm going to find it in Quran to be able to say such a thing. So it looks like that man found these in the Quran. So which maybe I should take it as an encouragement for improving my friendship with the Quran so as to get more guidance from it.
Go ahead, Brother Bacon.
Assalamu alaikum. So this part of text also, it seems controversial, right? As the first part, at least in the first, when we first read it, it's talking about, giving news from future and being able to, know about the events that haven't occurred yet. And talking about some examples about very controversial figure in the history of Islam, Ibn Arabi. And when I ask the question, what all these things signify for me? Like, let's assume that sorry, let me correct my so the Quran talks about future events, author says, and how important it is for me, because when I think about the future events, like whether this will happen or whether that will happen, for instance, whether the gold price will increase or decrease, whether the ideology of atheism will succeed or not, or whether my daughter will attend a good university or not. Quran having news from these, it's a huge claim, because in my natural understanding, in my default understanding of world, I say, these future events depends on many different factors and can be only explained by certain other events or the factors, other things in reality within the universe. So whether gold prices increase, whether gold price increases or decreases, it's a, we say, economical decision, economical fact. It has some political aspects. It has some, geographical aspects. It depends on the supply of the gold, how much gold is mined, and so on and so forth. So as if, not as if actually, we do have an understanding of future events which are related or which are depend on other things in the universe. Within a causal nexus, things happen, right? There are certain parts which happen by itself, and there are some other parts which are governed by natural laws, and other parts that happen through interactions between things. This is how we see reality, and future events are part of this reality. But Quran says, do you know what? No, this is not the case. I will tell you whether gold will increase, gold price will increase or not. It is recorded. It was recorded even, the 14 centuries ago. It is part of, from your perspective, of course, from human perspective. And Quran says, right, from God's perspective, whatever it means, from gaib or unseen perspective, God, the creator, is all-knowing. What will happen within his knowledge? So if, let's say, Imam Ibn Arabi could look at some verses and tell us what would happen in future. The possibility of such things changes, actually destroys our understanding of causal relationships. Because it means it is recorded there, and it doesn't matter how things interact. It will happen just because it was declared by the creator. So things do not happen by themselves, or things do not happen because they interact in a certain way. But they happen because, only because, creator declares so. And people like Ibn Arabi claims that such declarations, some of them, example of them, are given to human being in Quran. So creator declared that gold price will be that amount in that time, and it was told to humans 14 centuries ago. This is a completely different picture of reality, understanding of the reality. Things not being a product of causal relationships, but rather being product of creation, instant creation. It happens. Why? Because creator declares so. I think this signifies a lot. And again, does it fit with my expectation, what I expect, what I observe in reality? Yes, it does. So it's not a surprising thing that the knowledge of future is in the hands of my creator. And it's not a surprising thing that a part of this knowledge might be exposed to human being. To me, this is not only exciting because it talks about some mysterious, the abilities of some saints reading future, but it is so exciting that because it changes my understanding, my worldview, my understanding of reality. Tells me that your mistaken causal understanding of things is not true. Things happen because creator wishes so. Jazakallah.
Jazakallah khair. Brother Yusuf, what you just said, I really appreciate this. It just made me think, again, to testify that we think that any which way our lives can be, and now that we read Quran, we look at the miracles and the sudden happenstances that took place in the lives of our Anbiya. Hazrat Maryam's story, alayhi salam, and Hazrat Musa, Hazrat Isa, all Anbiya, Hazrat Nuh, I mean, everyone who we look at, I was just reading Surah Anbiya, and there too, Allah Ta'ala does give the glimpses of what the Yom Qiyamah's preparation will be like, the rolling up of the sky and the heavens, and how Allah Ta'ala protects the eavesdropping of jinn or evil from reaching up into the skies, where literally he says that the higher order um, celestial heavenly secrets that some shayateen want to get a hands on, they can't. And then there is, I think, one ayah, I'm forgetting that which chapter it is in, but there is an ayah that Allah Ta'ala says that I will blot out something from the decree from Lohe Mahfuz if I so will. Allah Ta'ala blots out. So the suspense of the reality of the unseen as unseen in and of itself is layered with loads and loads of hidden knowledge. And I think that it is a function of Allah Ta'ala's willfulness at the moment when He so desires to blot out things from someone's decreed qadar or qada. And as such, because this is a testament to Allah Ta'ala's all omnipotent self and the only being who is as powerful as He is, it does create that sense of both awe and immense fear that befits believing in Allah Ta'ala as the only Allah, as the only Rabb. And at the same time, there is something more. There is something more that because we have the capacity to be curious, we have the ilm and the aql to recognize that Quran is talking to us, making us, giving us almost like a blueprint to hold on, hang in there, suit up with your trust and taqwa for Allah, so that you can go back to the unseen without feeling uh, that you don't have any free will, because I think divine will is working in tandem with, but it is a superlative for human um, free will. And because we are the Abd and the Abdi, we have to have this surrender from the get go as our default mode to appreciate the station that He has. Finally, I'll say this, that reading this particular flash or shine, the word, I feel that it's a reflection on our helplessness and powerlessness. At the same time, it is also saying that that is the test and the trial of having strong belief, because when we are uncertain of something, holding on to something certain is hard. It's natural. And so what keeps us in our posts, so to speak, spiritual post, if you will, is that taqwa, that ability to give up what I don't have control over, have a good estimation of Allah Ta'ala's khair, and hence so many du'as are about it, that Allah Ta'ala, I want to uh, to only reach out to you in my desperation and expect nothing but only the mercy can come from you. This one line that, but if you cannot, and of a surety you cannot, but they will never seek it, we shall show them our signs on the furthest horizons and in their own selves, so that it becomes clear to them that this is the truth. It really makes me feel that indeed indeed, Allah Ta'ala is telling us that, and often He says, He prefaces it for the unbelievers, talking to Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, many a times in many surah, that you wait, Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. I am also waiting, and they are also waiting. The disbelievers may have a little bit of a more time here on earth. I am making them get bigger latitude. I am also planning. I am also, tell them of the day of the judgment, that it might be near, it may not be near, but I don't know. So the suspense to keep it in reverence for Allah Ta'ala, that he's not playing mind games now, Billah. He's really serious about this. And he is giving this as an ultimatum to the believers that you hold on and keep your faith dear. Meanwhile, the delusion that the unbelievers are living in, and that's why if you look at anybody who has ever been referred to as disbelievers, they are constantly asking and daring all the prophets and asking them, if your Allah is so and so, why don't you show us this sign? Why don't you show us that sign? How come we don't see? Why are you a man or a person who has flesh and is mortal, or eats or has kids and all of that? Unseen world is not known by anybody. Many of us have not seen angels. We have not seen, unless people have reached that level in Sufism where they can at least see somebody who they have taken reverence with as a scholar or as a Sufi saint. But the whole idea of even dreams, the world of the unseen, because Quran certainly has, and Islam as our tradition certainly has that idea that dreams can be from revelation and they can also be from shaitan, and some of it is just our own conscious, and in the modern times people say that all the information overload that we have, it's just our brain is a reservoir of all the images, so randomly in our sleep state something can come up that could just be from our own nafs. This line that we shall show them our signs on the furthest horizons and in their own selves, so that it becomes clear to them that this is the truth. This resonates to me for today's lecture so much. The other thing I want to just say very quickly is that I am on Clubhouse listening to one group that is pretty much everybody is non-Muslim there, but it is giving practical sense of and total abstract sense of photonics, quantum photonics. And even though I'm far from that level of technical knowledge in life sciences, but the more I hear them talk about everything under the sun, every logical explanation for the physical world as matter, and yet they don't include the word God, and they don't include, even though Christianity and Islam, because of me being in the group, sometimes it is compared, because the person who is uh, the moderator of that group, he used to be a Pentecostal, I think, priest or father. But in any event, the idea is that I just wonder how people lose that understanding that yes, you can be 100% on mark when it comes to recognizing that this is how it works, the universe and the solar system and the life cycles and the physical and the chemical world, the biophysics, all of that. But you don't want to acknowledge that Allah Ta'ala is behind it, and then there might be some other flip side to it, which is again the unseen. And I think that I'm blessed that when I look at it from, and I'm still learning, I'm definitely, thank God, not in ghafla, but sometimes there is doubt that comes in my mind. Why is that? What is the purpose of life? Why are we here? Why do we die early? Why do we die suddenly? Why is it, oh, am I really going to see my loved ones? So what will be the heavens like? But how do I know that I am in the right? Sami Yusuf has a song that he also translated in, or sings in Turkish and in Arabic and in English, which is the same, that Allah Ta'ala, I don't know, but make me strong. I don't know how you will treat me on that day, but I want to have certainty of faith. So I think it is just fascinating. I really constantly pray that Imam Nursidi, Allah Yarhamu, give him a high station in Jannah, because many tafasir that we read today in Quran, I'm from Pakistan, so I read Muslim, Sunni, Sahih International, or Qatab, or Ali, Yusuf Ali. But something like this is intended for intellectual probing, and hence it's a good tafsir. And this is how I take this narration. It's a tafsir, and it's a welcoming invitation back to Allah, and to his omnipotent attributes. Jazakallah khair.
Jazakallah khair. Thank you for your comments. We are out of time, basically. I do want to make one final comment, as your comments kind of reminded me of this, or helped me understand. Brother Bikram was at one point talking about how these verses, the future is not determined by causes. It is God who is creating them. And then also, tying this with the fact that we're talking about the future, or the unseen aspect of the future. And, the fact is, yes, these verses, like, you don't have to be a saint to understand how these speak of the future. And the reason I say that is because you could read this and you could implement this into your life. As far as I understand, is I can read these verses and I can implement them into my life, or I could read them within my life and I could see how they speak to me. And in my own life, I could see how my creator is speaking about my future. And in fact, I can even take this to past events that I've lived. And again, I could layer over that past event over this, and I could see again how it speaks about my future. And I can see how there is like a coherence there, at least with some of the verses. And that actually, when we read the Quran, we are reading our life explained to us in some sense. It is explaining how we can understand our life, and like both in the present and both in the future, or like how, if we're patient, we can persevere, type of thing. So just like this note that the unseen, or the future, or since God has control over it, since it is all in his forelock, and he's creating it, and this is speech, this Quran is his speech, his revelation, and he is giving me guidance through this about how to live. When I follow this guidance and I live in the way that he tells me, then I, in some sense, know what the future holds for me. Like, I can be certain about what the future holds for me. Yeah. Thank you, everyone, for attending and for these fruitful discussions. جزاك الله خيرا. سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. وآخر دعواهم إن الحمد لله رب العالمين. الفاتحة.